So I'm very excited to chat with Matt this morning from Exhumed. How the heck are you? You're getting back here. I think the last time was 2023.
Yeah, we are coming back. We're very excited. We have a new album that just came out in February called Red Asphalt. So we're back with a new record to support. And for me, I just love coming down to Australia. So any excuse that I can sort of wrangle to get down there, I'm always psyched about it.
Yeah, it's always a good response. I know probably everyone says it, but we have got a pretty rabid and kind of devoted kind of metal crowd. I think for shows there's a real kind of fever for shows. So I think it's always well received. What what do you think are the main differences from the last time, say, playing down here compared to, say, Europe or so? Is there any kind of main differences you see yourself?
um, I mean, the weather is always better down in Australia any time of year. Um, I think a lot of Europe, especially when you play in like Holland or even Belgium, certainly Switzerland, Germany, some of those countries. I think there's so many tours and so many gigs there and so many huge festivals. People, it's not like they don't turn up and they don't buy stuff or whatever, but the energy is a little bit more subdued there, I think, because there's another gig next week and they just went to another gig, a few days before, or there's 6 gigs this month and they, choose the three that they really
Mm,
want to go
yeah,
to
yeah.
out of those. Um, and I think in Australia, just because of the geographical isolation, there's just not, it's not as practical for overseas bands to come down there as much. So I think people are a little bit more excited. Um, I don't know, my experience in Australia though is that everybody in general, from the people at the gigs to the people that you meet, at the store, at the gas station, they're just friendlier. People are a little bit more just warm and have a sense of humor, and it's a little bit more fun down there. So
That's
being from California, that's I feel a little bit more at home down in Australia than I do in Europe.
No, no, no. That's awesome. I have to say, is the room you're in, is that your room? Because I'm very distracted by the posters. It's fucking amazing. Like I'm just like hit left, right. There's so many good things in there, man.
Yeah, this is the control room at our studio, also kind of my office, and yeah, there's more. Uh, you know,
Oh,
it
wow.
goes on. So if you're an old metal person, you probably feel right at home here. It's like an amalgamation of my bedroom in high school and my bedroom in grade school, because I have all my toys and action figures and shit in here too. So it's like all the things that my wife is like, yeah, we're not putting that in the house. It's like, okay, cool. Well, I'll put them here.
Man, it ticks every box. You've got Metallica, you've got Slayer, you've got Rainbow, Death, you've got and Sodom. I mean, I'm the same. So I think the thing about you guys, I mean, you've also been kicking it since 1990. Is it? I mean, it's really refreshing because you never slip into that, the legacy on nostalgia mode. I think it's always, you've always got the set's always full on, but you've never settled into that. Like a lot of bands do settle into that. It's
Yeah.
like the hits or whatever, where it's like the next album's always, dynamic and yeah, you seem to keep it from kind of calcifying.
I mean, I think that's something that we talk about amongst ourselves. I think a lot of times for older bands or whatever, putting out a new record is just kind of an excuse to go on tour again and play one song from the new album, and then all the songs that they played on the last 27 tours, and then one other song in the middle so people can go take a piss or get a beer or whatever. um, and it's also, so I mean, for us, I think we don't, I don't know that we hold any of our albums in such high regard or think that any of them are so important that we can just rest on them as laurels. But it's also kind of like, you know, as fans, the way I think about it is like we really have to kind of justify the existence of each record and be trying to do something. Because really at this point it's like, you know, what we've said a lot on, you know, we've stayed in the sort of same corner of the sandbox or the whole time. You know, it's death metal with elements of grindcore, elements of thrash. That's, you know, basically what we do. But, you know, we try to find a way to get a fresh take on it each time and find, you know, something musically, conceptually, or whatever that gets us fired up. And you know, once we have a direction, then it becomes interesting to us because I mean, ultimately, you know, there's dozens and dozens of Exhumed songs. You know, like it's not like I'm dying to like, okay, I got to write this song. You know, until I know that the song is about something, either musically or lyrically or both. And then that gets us pumped, and you know, hopefully we do better work. You know, and it's also our guitar player Sebastian, who's been in the band for several years now. You know, he's a lot younger than us. Ross and I just turned 50, and he, I think, is 32. So, you know, but so not only does he have a lot of energy, where sometimes maybe we wouldn't, but I think he is a good barometer of keeping us honest, you know, because we're the kind of band where if somebody brings something to the table that we just don't think is good enough, we just be like, yeah, this is not good. Like, you can do better, you know? So I think having that, you know, that, the dynamic of somebody younger, hungrier, and maybe not as jaded, although he's pretty jaded as Ross and I, you know, I think that keeps us honest musically and keeps us trying to, you know, try to do something relevant and valid, you know, because I don't want to, you know, I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, another album, blah, 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 whatever. You know, I don't want it to feel like that. You know, I want people to be like, hey, I like some better than others, but at least I should check this album out. Maybe it'll be, you know, maybe this will be one of the ones I really dig. Who knows, you know?
100%. I mean, it keeps it interesting for you guys as well. It keeps that kind of hunger. I wanted
Sure.
to touch on because I think on that note, I think your previous album, To the Dead, and the current one, Red Asphalt, I think it's a much more raw, almost confrontational, almost kind of visceral. What was kind of that approach? I mean, the other albums weren't exactly an acoustic album, but I yeah, and the new album's fantastic, but I just think it's even pushed that even more, you know, on those yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a very conscious decision on our part. You know, I don't mean it in a curmudgeonly way, but I really don't care for a lot of the modern metal production. And in fact, the bands that I think are the most egregiously guilty are a lot of the veteran bands, you know, where maybe, you know, they were making records in the 80s and they didn't have the technology to capture the performances, they didn't have the skill to play the music as well as they would have liked, and now they're overcompensating by just producing their records to death and, you know, sound replacing all the fucking drums and, you know, making sure every single note is exactly in tune and exactly on time, and it becomes very safe and cautious sounding. um so we try to find a way to, you know, obviously we want to, you know, we want it to be good. We want to portray what we're doing in a positive light, but we don't want the music to serve the production. We want the production to serve the music. And if that means, you know, that we err on the side of it sounding maybe rawer than we would have liked, then that's the better way to err. You know, I think we all agreed after we did To the Dead that, you know, we were trying for some different kinds of tones. The jury is, you know, split on how well it worked or whatever. But I was like, you know what? At the very least, this album doesn't sound like the record we did before it. It doesn't sound like the record that we did after it. And it doesn't sound like fill in the blank death metal album, you know, or metal album produced by Andy Sneap or Zeus or any of these guys who are all great engineers. They're amazing. But we just, you know, we're really trying to consciously stay away from that, just that whole over processed, over produced, manicured kind of sound,
It's kind of almost like the antithesis of the whole aim of it, isn't it? I mean, like you said, you want to produce an album that's not shit, and you've got but sometimes it's just too clean, isn't it? Like it doesn't have that spark, does it? So I think, particularly with you guys live as well, you want to be on par with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the band, of the record sounding, similar to what the band sounds like live. I mean, that's exciting to me, and it's another thing that we have no interest in, performing live to a click track or metronome. We have no interest in using additional tracks. I mean, the intro is fine, but we don't want to become mechanized and processed, in the live or on record. And I think, as a musician, I totally understand the temptation to get this amazing superhuman production, because you want to hear what your thing is, and you want it to sound perfect and blah blah blah. But I think about all these great records that people love, and nobody is sitting there being like, well, Slowly We Rot would have been better if it was, recorded in Pro Tools and to a click track and, 64 tracks. And if they would have just replaced the kick drum, it's like, nobody fucking thinks that. No, nobody says that. So, I mean, and it even goes as far back as like, Led Zeppelin. I mean, there's all kinds of, what would be considered mistakes, in the guitar takes. And this is shit you hear on the radio every day. These are some of the biggest songs ever. So this idea that making it more perfect is what the audience wants is, I don't believe that. I don't think the audience cares. I think the audience wants to rock. And if the production is getting in the way of rocking, then the production's got to go,
Big time. I wanted to talk about the current album because it's, obviously the foundation is a lot of gore metal stuff. This kind of differs a little bit, and I also wanted to touch on the effort with the film clips, and that I think that is so good, and that is kind of missing. You know what I mean? Like it's because we, none of us should take ourselves too serious. But yeah. So those 2 points, I think it's it differs. So do you want to touch on the kind of some of the themes of it, because I think it's interesting and it obviously ties in with the videos as well.
Sure. Well, it's funny because last time we were in Australia, the whole concept of this album arose on our trip home. My studio is like halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's about 3 hours north of Los Angeles by automobile. So we did Japan, then we did Australia, and we flew back. That's like a 16-hour flight. We picked up the van, and then we drove 3 hours to here. And so we were all jet lagged. We left and it's 16 hours later, only 1 hour of time has passed. What day is it? Where are we? And we were all just fucking loopy. And so we're driving in the car and, we had talked about like, oh, why is there no great death metal road ballads? And it was just sort of like a joke, the running joke for a few months. And we're like, fuck it. We should just do a whole album around that. Like, because, the road is full of accidents. It's full of, maimings, mutilations. People are getting killed out here every day. Excuse me. And, we just had this whole thing. That's how we stayed awake for that 3-hour drive, was discussing all these ideas that would sort of become Red Asphalt. And, that was really the sort of linchpin that pulled the album together, because, I always it's always more appealing to me when there's a full thing where there's a visual component, a lyrical component, a musical component, and it all works together and pulls in the same direction. And as soon as we kind of committed to that, then, the album started taking shape pretty quickly. And, Red Asphalt was a, air quotes, educational film series in the States. Basically, they would just show it to kids, and they would, in school, to be like, hey, you got to drive safe or you're going to fucking die like this guy in the movie. And especially, they started showing him in the 60s. And this is, before even, Blood Feast and the old Herschel Gordon Lewis movies. So kids had never seen this kind of stuff. Like, it was the most brutal gore that, a teenager would have seen. By the time I was old enough to drive, I'd already seen, Reanimator and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all this stuff. But, kids my dad's age, would see this shit and, people would throw up, people would faint, because they just were watching people get their fucking arms torn off. And so we thought, not only is it a catchy title that will be familiar to some people, but it's like we already have a whole visual component of like public domain. It's not copyrighted, this shit, because it's educational. So we can use it for whatever videos and stuff on stage. We can do whatever we want with it totally legally. It just made complete sense, and obviously being in a touring band, 80% of your time is getting to the next gig. That's the reality of it. It's like, cool, you play for an hour, you sit around for 3 or 4 hours before that, and then you're in the car for 6, 7, sometimes 10 hours, just getting from place to place. So it just all kind of came together.
It does. I think it's great. It's like, that element adds to it. I mean, it's apart from just being a sick album anyway, like it's really good. It sits well in the catalog, and it'll be, fantastic to see those tracks live. But because I was cracking up at those videos, I just thought that's fantastic. So, thanks so much for your time. Because you've got a very busy schedule of interviews, and I'm super keen to see you guys. It's not too far away, so I'm definitely going to come and see you at the show in Melbourne. Looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for your time, and thanks for looking into your room, because that's it's a great body of work, the whole lot of it.
Well, cheers, man. I appreciate it. We'll see you. We'll see you in Melbourne, and it's gonna be a good time. If your idea of a good time is getting splattered with fake blood and screamed at in extremely high volumes for an hour and a half, then it's gonna be a great time.
It doesn't get better than that, man. It doesn't get better.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, thanks again, man, and we'll see you soon.
Cool. Cheers. We'll see you in Melbourne.